Video games have changed drastically over the years. What used to be a hobby for computer nerds and geeks alike has become mainstream, and you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who hasn't at least tried playing a video game. With workout games, party games, and even games you can play as an actual cat, there's definitely something for everyone. But this wasn't always the case. The first video game, Pong, was created by Alan Acorn in November of 1972. Pong was a table tennis-themed game where each player had a paddle on opposite sides of the screen. The goal was to reach 11 points, and the points were earned when a player failed to retrieve the ball with their paddle. We don't think much of Pong now or consider it as revolutionary other than the fact that it was the first video game. So it's hard to believe that a game created less than 10 years after the release of Pong would be so revolutionary, so iconic, that it would eventually spawn an entire genre of games. The History of Gaming, Episode 1, Roguelikes. Roguelikes are one of my all-time favorite genres of games, but it's hard to know what a roguelike is without first exploring the rogue and roguelike. Rogue was a dungeon-crawling game by Michael Toy and Glenn Wickman and was originally released in 1980 around the Unix-based mainframe and was a freely distributed software, basically the equivalent of a modern free-to-play game. The game was later ported to Atari, Commodore 64, Macintosh, and DOS, making it much more accessible. Rogue is available for purchase on Steam for $2.99, so I thought, what the hell, I'll give it a shot. I wasn't really sure what to expect. I had played a ton of roguelikes, but I'm not old enough to have experienced Rogue in its heyday, and truth be told, I'd never even seen gameplay of it. When I first booted up the game, I was greeted with an 8-bit picture of an adventurer holding up a torch, brandishing a sword, and facing off against a Cthulhu-esque monster. Promising. Nothing could really prepare me, though, for what was in store. My general approach to most video games is to jump right in, fool around, see what does what. Usually within 10 to 15 minutes I can figure out what the controls are and what I'm supposed to do. Maybe these controls are universally understood in the 80s, but I honestly could not figure out what to do other than just randomly wandering around the dungeon and fighting the text-based monsters that would spawn. Eventually I reached a room with no exits and a symbol on the floor that I didn't know what it meant. After about 5 minutes of trying to interact with a symbol, just pressing random keys on my keyboard, I figured there must be something I'm missing. I thought, okay, I'll just press escape and see what the controls are. Nothing. Tried to tab out of the game. Also nothing. Eventually I had to Control-Alt-Delete out of the game, and after about 10 minutes searching online, couldn't find anything. I eventually turned to the Steam page and I saw a manual under additional resources. Wow, I was actually going to read a game manual. Hadn't read one of those in almost 20 years. This brought back so much nostalgia, riding home from Blockbuster after my brand new rented game and just reading through the manual waiting to play it once I got home. I found my inability to get out of the game once I was in was actually spillover from another feature from the developers. The developers had initially intended for the game to be played through in a single sitting and there were no save states. It wasn't until other students at USCS, who were playtesting the game, asked for save states to be included did this feature actually get added. It was shortly after this feature was added that the developers found out that people were save scumming, which is essentially reloading from a previous point in the game to avoid death or some other consequence. They changed it so the save file was erased upon reloading the game, making your character's death permanent. Permadeath is nothing new to games of that era. Games like Pac-Man, Frogger, Galaga, even though you had additional lives, once they were up, it was game over and you had to start again from the beginning. One thing that Rogue did differently than any other game of that time was procedural generation. Procedural generation is taking some human-generated inputs, some computer-generated inputs, and then filter them through an algorithm. What this does is generate a randomness to the levels and monsters, but within a certain defined range, so you don't end up with stairs that lead to nowhere or running into a monster at 1000 HP when you're level 1. Procedural generation provided a uniqueness to every playthrough or run, so you couldn't just memorize the correct sequences. You had to adapt, take what you were given, and hope you didn't run into any slimes. Seriously though, those slimes. Rogue did a lot for the video game industry, laying the groundwork for some of my all-time favorite games like Slay the Spire, Hades, Binding of Isaac, and Dead Cells. The game itself did not age well though, and I cannot see myself playing this outside of the short time I played it while making this video. Maybe it's just my rodent brain, but I would totally hop on a game of Pac-Man or Galaga at a barcade, but I was fighting for consciousness while playing this game. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It totally helps with the YouTube algorithm, and if you could leave in a comment the next video you want to see, that would be awesome. That's all I got for you today. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good day. See ya.